All right, one last topic that I thought was just really fascinating in your book, Creating the Qur'an, which, by the way, yes, everyone should buy, but you said it's open access, is that right?
You didn't know that?
I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe I knew it and forgot, but it's
yeah.
still
It's free.
it's worth repeating. It's worth repeating. Yeah.
It's free.
So
It's free from Amazon as a Kindle. You can get it through the Cal website. It's on my academia page. I got a PDF posted there if you want it.
great. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I want to make this free to anyone in the world with an internet connection and a government that's not censoring what they can download.
okay, let's speak about something that really I found fascinating. That is in a later chapter, but not the last chapter. I'm forgetting which chapter, but it's memory science.
Me too. My favorite part of the book.
You are the first person, I think, to introduce the community of Quranic Studies scholars to this whole thing. I mean, I didn't even know this field existed. I probably should have, I guess, assumed that psychologists and sociologists would think about human capacities of memory and try to apply it to things from the humanities and etc. But the field does exist, and you say you show what it says about the capacities and the reliability of human memory, and you apply it to a certain extent to how this should shape our understanding the transmission of the Quran. I memean, I'd like to just touch on it here. I'd love to have you back a second time and really have a deep dive into some of the studies of memory science. I would commend everyone to read those chapters and to look at some of the examples, because it's better, I think, reading them, because there's very specific data over how much people can actually remember. And basically the answer is not very much.
Right.
But I wanted to just ask you a pointed question about this. So let's just say someone reads your book and sees this data, people give nonsense words, a list of nonsense words, and 10 minutes later go back to the subject of the test and say, okay, tell me nonsense words, and they've got no idea. They can't remember it. There are people, for example, Lord and Perry. I mean, you could do this better, but I'm just sort of going quickly here because I want to get to the pointed question. Lord and Perry, they did field work to study the work of, I think, Yugoslavian at the time oral storytellers. You show how Perry listened to one version of an oral tale, and then Lord comes back, unless I've got it mixed up and it's the other way around, doesn't really matter. Lord comes back, listens to the same tale, and it's totally different. It's much longer. And so you have all these anecdotal arguments for the problems of human memory. But I just want to ask this question. Okay, finally, after that too long of an introduction, people would say, one, okay, but it's different in Arabia in early Islamic times, because it was, as you would say, most people are not literate, and so the capacities of human memory in non-literate societies are higher. They just have amazing retention. Some people might even say, and this is kind of problematic, the Arabs themselves, culturally, or maybe they would say something else, have a remarkable capacity for memory. What would you say to that?
That is not true, at least if you believe science.
Okay.
Right? We're all supposed to trust the science, right? That's what we learned during the pandemic. They've done scientific studies of these kinds of things. And time and again, it's just been shown false. And one of the most remarkable things to come out of memory studies was they've shown that actually memory improves with writing, right? People in literate cultures have better memories, better capacity for memories, partly because they can off-source some of that other stuff. This was an extraordinary finding for me in reading about this stuff. But yeah, before you get to your other question, let me just say, please read this chapter. This was my favorite chapter. This was my favorite chapter, I think, of anything I've ever done.
So let me just ask a follow-up question.
Okay.
Probably the next to last question. But people would say, okay, fine, but I don't have to try to convince you that Arabs in the 7th century had great memory abilities, because I can point to today, young Muslim children who memorize the Quran and recite it completely orally. And, there are ceremonies in different Islamic cultures where this is celebrated, etc. So doesn't that show that people could remember verbatim what the Quran, how it was originally proclaimed, and even if it were 10 years later, still recorded that precisely?
Fantastic question, one that is answered in the chapter on memory science, with all the necessary documentation to send you to the places where you can see the basis for my answer. Verbatim memory of a text is only possible in a literate culture. This is what the specialists on memory science have found. What has been repeatedly shown to be true is that verbatim recall of a text, more than 50 words, in the absence of a written text, has never been done. That's what the memory scientists say. So once you have a written Quran, you can do that. And part of why you can do that is because when you get it wrong, you can go back to that and you can fix it. And you can keep fixing it until you've got it. But until you've got that thing you can keep going back to, it's going to change.
There's a lot of other things I want to get to that we didn't get to, which will be the way that I start the email to you when I invite you for another episode. But in the meanwhile, last question, how can people stay in touch with your work? Just stay up to date with the things you're working on.
That's a good question. I try to post things on Academia EDU once I think they've been out long enough. And I have my own webpage. You can always track me down through Stephen-Shoemaker.com and see what I'm up to. It's not, not as up to date as maybe it should be, but you can email me if you want. I always say everyone who emails me gets one response. If you get a second response, it depends. It depends on how interesting your response to my response was. I get a lot of email. People want me to explain things to them, and just depending on the conversation, you may or may not get a longer response from me. But generally, if you have a quick question about something, I usually to give you a prompt and quick response. So I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on the Gram. I hate those things. I think they're pernicious to society. I wish they would all go away.
Okay. Well, Professor Stephen Shoemaker, thank you so much for being on Exploring the Quran and the Bible.
Thanks for having me on. I hope I wasn't too punchy.